There's a trail of blood leading from one of the dungeon cells. Standing over the haggard fellow and looking at him with disdain, the girl with golden hair asks him if he knows where his accomplices are. All she hears in response is a hopeless wheeze. Angry, the girl drew her sword and, pointing it at the prisoner, ordered him to answer the question. Breathing heavily, the battered boy only stared blankly at the blade. This guy didn't even think she'd come here. This girl is the pureblood heir of the Supreme Sword. No one can match her strength and the power of her cold weapon skills. Once, she even managed to slay hundreds of half-demons in just one attack. The divine sword of Wee Sol. She was the one who finished off the heavenly demon. That's when it all started. Wee Sola started the great war between the righteous and the demons. Moving closer, the golden-haired girl grabbed the beaten guy by the scruff of his neck and lifted him up. Pushing him against the wall, Sola shouted that she was sure this boy knew where the remaining half-demons were headed. Looking hatefully at the prisoner, the girl added that he was obliged to tell her everything if he felt the least bit of guilt. The exhausted boy in turn could not utter a word. And it's not just that he can't speak because his vocal cords are torn. On top of that, he is restrained by the seal, and so he can't tell her the whole truth. Then, unable to hold back tears, Wee Sola suddenly muttered that this was his last chance. Now everyone is demanding this guy's death, but if he helps her, Sola will do everything in her power to save him. With trembling hands clutching his robe tightly, the golden-haired girl began to plead with him. Bursting into tears, Sola said he was her last hope. Perhaps she is driven by a hate for half-demons that she can no longer contain. Or maybe the reason lies in Meteor's sword, Jang So-young, her fiancé who was kidnapped by half-demons. Realizing that this was indeed the reason, the exhausted guy smiled mockingly. That the strongest woman in the world was suffering for a man seemed incredibly stupid to him. Seeing that disgusting smirk on his face, Wee Sola abruptly pulled the jerk by the scruff of his neck to her. In one deft move, the golden-haired girl toppled the prisoner to the dungeon floor. Shaking with anger, Sola muttered that if she had known how mean he was, she would have finished him off the first time they met. She incredibly wishes she had done it sooner. Staring indifferently at the golden-haired girl, the prisoner wondered if she remembered exactly how they had met. Of course, it's likely that their memories are very different. But in those days, things seemed much simpler. And since when did things get so screwed up? This guy is a traitor for joining the ranks of half-demons and killing a lot of people. What he's going through now is karma for all his transgressions. Realizing that the prisoner wouldn't give the answer she wanted, a frustrated Sola headed for the dungeon exit. Suddenly, she heard such strange sounds behind her. The exhausted boy sat down on his knees and began to write something in blood on the stone floor. Seeing this, Wee Sola asked Gu Yeonjun what he was doing. At the same moment, Yeonjun's cursed seal activated and bound his heart. The boy's body could not withstand such pressure, forcing him to defecate blood through his mouth. But as it turned out, that was part of his plan. As one could already realize, there was a curse on Gu Yeonjun. If he breaks his word by telling the secrets of the sect, his heart will burst and he will die. The heavenly demon art states, "Don't you dare betray a demonic cult." Alarmed, Wee Sola ran up to the prisoner and started asking if he was okay and how he got so much blood. However, Yeonjun could no longer make out the golden-haired girl's words. The only thing he thought about in that moment was what would happen if he told her he had acted out of his own free will. Would she believe him if he admitted he was forced? Yeonjun could make excuses endlessly, but it was too late. There was no point. He's done. As soon as the guy finished the last word on the dungeon floor, his heart couldn't withstand the pressure of the seal. Once again spitting blood, Yeonjun slumped to the ground. Gradually losing consciousness, the boy wondered why he had been given such a life. On the verge of death, the boy began to reminisce about the loved ones he had lost. In the death visions, Yeonjun found himself during their last meeting with his sister. She patted him on the head that day and wished him to be happy. Meanwhile, noticing that the prisoner had stopped breathing, Wee Sola began trying to bring him to his senses. Barely opening his eyes, Gu Yeonjun realized that it was as if all regrets from small to large had been created to fall on him. He also brought up some character whose role the author didn't deign to tell us. Walking up to some of the green-haired girl, the guy stopped next to her and silently looked into her bald head. Sensing his presence, the stranger only smiled happily. Lifting her head, the girl said she was terribly sorry. Without uttering a word, the guy only continued to stare into her face. Shouting out Gu Yeonjun's name, Wee Sola had already guessed that there was nothing else he could do to help him. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, she started dropping tears on the dying guy's face. Meanwhile, reaching out a bloody hand to Yeonjun's face, a woman's voice asked if he was crying. "It's all right. It's just the rain," replied the guy, looking sadly at the woman lying on the ground. After making sure he was okay, the stranger asked if the moon had risen. Hearing the positive answer, the girl lifted her hand and was glad to see that they were both in place. After saying those words, her body weakened and her hand fell into Gu Yanjun's lap. This guy's name is Gu Yanjun from the Shanxi Gu clan. He was born into the righteous faction and lived as their loyal fighter. But he soon betrayed them and defected to the side of the demons. However, the demonic cult lost the war against the righteous, and Janjun was captured and tortured until death caught up with him. Potatoes! Fresh hot potatoes! You want some potatoes? Here, eat some, said a girl with a basket in her hands, holding out a potato. Upon seeing her, young Gu Yanjun fell into a stupor. What the hell? Shouted the boy, looking around. Turning his gaze to his hands, the guy had no way of knowing what was going on. He is certain he has broken the heavenly demon's ban. Moreover, Gu Yanjun distinctly remembered that his heart had burst. Most recently, he passed away in Wee Sola's arms. That's exactly what happened. But then why was his heart beating as if nothing had happened? While pondering this, Yanjun lowered his hands and looked around again. It came to him almost immediately that he found himself in the body of a younger version of himself. It's probably just a dream. After all, there was no other way to explain how Gu Yanjun had gotten to the first day of their meeting with Wee Sola. Seeing the potato in the girl's hand, the boy tried to remember what he had answered her last time. Yeah, that time he just carelessly knocked the potato out of Sola's hand. The girl was stunned by this behavior. As the potato fell to the ground, Yanjun stepped closer and crushed it with his boot. How dare any rabble block my passage? Have you forgotten your place? The irritated boy shrieked, glaring angrily at the commoner. Thinking back to that situation, Yanjun realized that he had been too rude. And judging from the fact that he was dreaming about it, the guy guessed he had quite a few regrets left. When the boy reached out for the potatoes, the girl looked away embarrassed and asked in a trembling voice if there was anything he didn't like. Smiling warmly, Yanjun thanked the stranger for the treat. After that, without thinking long, he took a bite of potato. Scalding his tongue, the boy cried out in pain. He hadn't expected to get burned in his sleep. Seeing how amusingly reddened this boy's face was, the girl laughed loudly. Meanwhile, from behind Yanjun's back, the excited shouts of a bodyguard could be heard. Running up to the young lord, Myung asked the boy where he had disappeared to so suddenly. Looking at Yanjun excitedly, the bodyguard added that he was very worried about him. That's when Myung noticed the boy's burnt tongue and the hot potato in his hand, as well as the strange girl beside him. Clutching his sword, the angry bodyguard asked how dare she do this to the young master. However, after saying that he was fine, Yanjun asked rather to give him a honey cookie. The boy distinctly remembers that Myung always carried it with him. After giving the young lord what he asked for, the man with the sword warned that this was the last cookie. And while Yanjun gave the treat to the unknown girl, the bodyguard couldn't stop wondering what his master was sharing with someone. The surprised commoner asked the boy if she could really have the cookies, to which Gu Yanjun only scratched the back of his head and explained that unfortunately, that was all he could repay for such a delicious potato. Admiring the guy's kindness, the girl told me that this was the first time she had ever been given something like this. Not only does this cookie smell delicious, but it also looks very appetizing. Suddenly, from somewhere in the crowd came the voice of an older man calling Visola by name. When she saw her concerned grandfather running towards her, the girl was very happy. As she jumped into his arms, the grandfather asked his granddaughter if she was in one piece. He'd told her not to let go of his hand. And after Sola calmed him down by telling him that everything was fine and the potatoes were in place, the elderly man explained to the troublemaker that the potatoes were not the problem. Concerned, the grandfather walked over to his granddaughter and asked if she had hurt herself or if she had given anyone any trouble. While the two were talking, Gu Yanjun was stunned. It seemed like he had seen this old man somewhere before. Meanwhile, Sola pointed her finger at the boy and cheerfully told her grandfather that she had only given one potato to him. Noticing the young lord and his bodyguard, the old man lowered his head and hummed unhappily. He then grabbed his granddaughter's hand and took a step forward, lowering it. After bowing before the venerable ones, the elderly man explained to them that his granddaughter did not yet understand how the world works. She had committed a grave sin against a young gentleman from a noble family, so the grandfather apologized for the inconvenience. But, unexpectedly, Gu Yanjun asked the old man not to worry, explaining that in fact, he was even grateful to her. The fact is that the boy was just hungry, and this stranger offered him potatoes, which he gladly ate. All the guy can give in return is a honey cookie, which he asked them to accept as a thank you if they don't mind. The old man looked at the treat, but he couldn't understand what the young master meant. Without letting her grandfather answer, Sola ran forward and shrieked that she didn't mind. So sweet and shiny! the girl said enthusiastically, reaching out her hand for the cookie. However, Sola never got her cherished treat, as her grandfather immediately grabbed her and, running away, shouted that they couldn't accept something so precious. But even after the old man respectfully said goodbye, Gu Yanjun asked him to wait for a while. Turning around, the grandfather asked to be allowed to take the punishment if the young master was angry. Except it was already late, and Yanjun gave the cookies to the girl, after which he promised to meet again. While his granddaughter was chatting with the young gentleman, the old man had something on his mind. Looking at the two children chatting, Grandpa smiled contentedly. His granddaughter finally found the one. After thanking the honored ones once more for their kindness, Sola and his grandfather said their goodbyes and left. Yanjun and his bodyguard in turn just stood still and looked at them contentedly. Making sure the two finally couldn't see them, the boy grabbed his head and exhaled in relief. This old man was still the head of the Muram Warrior Alliance not long ago. He was one of the 3 supreme ranks. They were known as the strongest in Muram, those who sowed fear and terror in the ranks of the infidels. It was the supreme sword, Wi Hyogun. Except that Yanjun still couldn't figure out what a supreme sword was doing in a place like this. Anyway, it doesn't matter now. Gu Yanjun has been unconscious for a long time, and all of this is just the ramblings of a dying man. Be that as it may, the guy is glad to have experienced that exact moment again. Now he had one less regret, and it was time to wake up. While Yanjun was pondering this, Mu Young had already managed to bring his young master home. Then the boy wondered why the dream never ended. Wasn't it time to wake up? Although it may not be a dream at all. Could it be the residual heavenly demon curse? A rather familiar female voice interrupted Yanjun's musings. How nice. He's not even running away, even though the clan head himself is heading this way, the dark-haired girl muttered, walking over to the boy. This girl's name is Firesword Gu Yongso. She is the second oldest sister to Janjun. This is the person who despises him the most. In that case, since she's here, it means that everyone has gathered to welcome the clan head. Heading towards her younger brother, Youngso wondered what he was up to this time. The girl put her hand on Yanjun's shoulder and suggested he change his mind and get the hell out of here if he was going to embarrass himself again. But pushing his sister's hand away indifferently, the boy explained that he was here because he had to be. Then, upon hearing his sister's objection that he had never appeared here before, Yanjun turned around and admitted that it was indeed his fault. He would personally apologize to the clan head later. Such words made Youngso very angry, and the bodyguard standing next to her was surprised that the young lord was going to apologize to someone. Gu Yanjun! The dark-haired girl suddenly yelled in rage. With anger, Yanso literally broke through the concrete beneath her, and a terrifying aura enveloped her body. Burning with hatred, she swiftly headed towards the guy. Gritting her teeth, Yanso said that she didn't know what kind of shenanigans her brother was up to, but she would nip it in the bud anyway. And when the girl advised her brother to stop acting like a creep, Yanjun abruptly stopped her and asked her to stop. Their father, or rather the head of the clan, was already close by. Looking menacingly at his offspring, the leader inquired what was going on here. Arriving at the square on his horse, the clan head immediately rode up to his third child. Stopping beside him, the scarred man looked at Yanjun seriously. Noticing his father, the boy lifted his head and looked him in the eye as well. A sepulchral silence hung over the square, and tension began to build. Just as suddenly, the clan head abruptly turned around and summoned his deputy. As he dismounted, he asked which sword was free at the moment. Bowing to his leader, the deputy told him that the first sword was still resting after his recent return, and the fourth was waiting for instructions. Heading inside the house, the clan head asked his deputy to tell the fourth sword to get ready and come to him. Even now, Janjun couldn't tell if it was a dream or reality. His father's gaze was still as heavy as ever. While the boy was thinking about it, the clan leader suddenly stopped and looked back at him. Turning to his third child, the man said he would wait for him in his chambers when dinner was over. Such an unexpected invitation greatly startled Janjun. Realizing what would happen to him after lunch, the boy looked hopelessly at his bodyguard and asked for a stomach remedy. Soon evening came and it was time for dinner. The tables were already set and the clan leader sat in the center, watching his children enter the dining room. Seated at one of the tables, Yanjun looked at the bowl of rice in front of him and sighed heavily. The atmosphere at lunch was still the same. The boy didn't even know whether he was eating with his mouth or his nose. He was already uncomfortable with the fact that he'd gotten a personal invitation. It would be nice to have someone to lighten the mood. As soon as Yanjun thought about it, the clan head turned to the second child. Raising a shot of sake, the man said that he had heard about Gu Yongso's success in martial arts. After confirming this, the overjoyed girl narrated with a smile that she had advanced a bit and had gotten her third star a couple days ago. The father praised his daughter, remarking that she was quite good for her age, and he was glad to hear of her progress. Listening to his father and sister's conversation, Yeonjun noticed that Youngso had gotten her third star at a rather young age. It's common for someone so gifted to work hard. The boy was also surprised that Yeonso could smile too. A smile really suited her. That may not be entirely true, though. The next person the clan leader addressed was Yeonjun. The boy almost choked on his dumpling when he heard it. Looking menacingly at the third child, the man at the center table asked why Yeonjun had left the area. In response, the boy explained that he had to go out for a while because he had some business there. After listening to his son, the clan leader thought deeply, then slowly rose from the table. Telling the children that he would leave them alone for a while, the man asked them to continue eating their lunch. This strange behavior clearly surprised Jeonjun. It seemed to him that his father had something to say. Anyway, they had an appointment this afternoon, so he would probably ask all the questions later. A servant girl interrupted the boy's musings, whispering in his ear that the clan head had told Yeonjun to rest today and to come to his chambers tomorrow. After the meal, the boy went to his room and sat down by the window. He still hasn't woken up, which means it's not a dream. Could it be a regression? It's the kind of thing you only read about in books. Thinking about it, Yeonjun slammed his fist on the window frame. It was quite possible that he had gotten a chance to get rid of the heavenly demon. No, that's a crazy thought. It's better to discard it at once. How could he defeat someone who had killed 3 supreme ranks that surpassed the heavens? As soon as Jeonjun thinks of his past life, where he was a half-demon obeying the orders of a heavenly demon just to survive, he is overcome with bitterness and frustration. A life filled with regrets helped him realize a lot of things. If he was indeed reborn, he wanted to experience this life differently. The heavenly demon will still be killed by Wisola, and the demon cult will disappear. Until this is resolved, Gu Yeonjun will live a peaceful life and do what he can. He won't miss this opportunity. I no longer want him to feel the weight of past regrets. Exhaling, the boy decided he should check something out first. Concentrating all his internal energy into one point, the guy checked its volume. The result didn't surprise him much. Yeonjun scanned his body, but not much internal energy could be found. Seeing those measly crumbs, you can realize how incredible his sister is. She's only a year older, but already has 3 stars. But even so, a boy can still change that. He would train with a cultivation technique that was only passed down to the Gu clan's blood relatives. This technique is called the Gu Fire Wheel. If Yeonjun were to gradually nurture it, like a blossoming flower, only he would obtain the 4th star, he would be able to emit fiery internal energy. And by the 7th star, he would be able to cover his entire body in fire. But so far, the boy only has his 1st star. Now he needs to gather his inner energy as fast as he can and hone it until he gets his 2nd star. For this life to be peaceful, a guy should not use demonic energy. From now on, he will only use his own power. However, it's not as simple as it may seem at first glance. There was a bit of a problem with using Gu's fire wheel technique alone. The longer Jeonjun uses it, the more likely it becomes that he will die. With his current skill level, it's not easy to utilize internal energy. If he forces himself, that fire will destroy his body. However, Yeonjun's body was not as weak as he had expected it to be. Even such efforts have borne fruit. His fire wheel Gu technique skills were still at an early stage, yet he was already pulling a 2nd star. At this point, there is nothing left for the boy to do but keep practicing. Step by step at a moderate pace, he will sooner or later come to a life different from the past. Gu Yeonjun would not do anything that could negatively affect his impending future. Morning came. The singing of birds woke up Jeonjun. After he opened his eyes, it took the boy some more time to come to his senses. He had no way of knowing why his whole body ached after just one little workout. After getting dressed, Yeonjun realized that it was his own fault for being such a slacker in the past. In any case, he still had a long way to go. He had a meeting with the clan head today. He decided to postpone it until the afternoon and go for some training. But as soon as the boy opened the front door, he saw a rather familiar commoner lying on the threshold. Staring at Yeonjun with a happy smile, Visola greeted him. One day, a giant crack appeared in the sky. Some people thought it was just an unusual-looking star. However, it wasn't long before the eye of some enormous monster appeared from that crack. On that day, the history of mankind was divided into before and after. A monster suddenly fell from the void. This phenomenon became known as the Demon Rift. From then on, each sect began to raise warriors trained to fight against the monsters. They were called swords and were present in every sect. There were 5 of them in the Gu clan. The oldest daughter of the Gu clan, Gu Huibi, was their commander. And Jeonjun, the troubled son, spent half his life under her tyranny. It was on one such day, when Huibi was once again dragging the boy somewhere by the hair, that their first meeting took place. Gu Yeonjun and Wee Sola's first official meeting. After the potato incident, 6 months had passed before this sudden meeting. But now, in some strange way, they had met again. Opening the front door, Yeonjun saw a rather familiar commoner lying on the threshold. "Apparently, I didn't sleep well last night," the boy muttered quietly, heading back to the room. Except that she didn't let Wee Sola's boyfriend get away, sharply hooking her hand into his kimono. Still not understanding what the hell was going on here, Yeonjun stopped and looked at the girl in surprise. Looking sweetly at the boy, Sola said that she was very happy to see them. But just as the girl was about to say something else, someone came up to them and punched Sol in the arm. Looking sternly at his granddaughter, Wee Hyogun reminded her that the young master should not be treated like that. This situation drove Jeonjun even more into a stupor, and while Sola apologized to him for her behavior, the boy stood dumbfounded and tried to comprehend what was happening. After scolding his shallow granddaughter, Wee Hyogun bowed to the young master. The old man introduced himself with the name Wee Moon. From now on, he would serve the young master as a token of gratitude to the head of his clan, and he promised to devote himself to it. These words made Yeonjun even more perplexed. He thought the old man's name was Wee Hyogun. Humbly sitting next to the old man, Wee Sola also introduced herself and said she would help her grandfather. Staring at them puzzled, Gu Yeonjun couldn't believe that these two would now be his servants. But it seems he has no choice, as it seems that it was the Gu clan leader who gave this order. It seems that this life is also going wrong. Lastly, Yeonjun asked these two to call him by his first name because he didn't want to be young master. Of course, Wee Moon obeyed his young master's order. After a few minutes, the old man took a broom and started sweeping the yard in front of Jeonjun's room. Watching him, the boy asked Moon if he was really going to clean this place up. Then the old man suddenly stopped and turned menacingly on the boy. After that, he smiled kindly and continued sweeping. Waving his hand, Yeonjun realized that this grandpa was too stubborn to dissuade him. Especially besides this old man, the boy has another helper who can bring a lot more trouble. While her grandfather undermetaled the yard, Wee Sola set about helping the maids with the laundry. And although the girl was warned that it was dangerous to carry so many things at once, Sola still took a whole mountain of laundry. The maids saw that the new girl was having a hard time, so they offered to help her. But the girl was stubborn and said she could do it on her own. Eventually, Sola's stubbornness led to her tripping over a rock and knocking over the entire mountain of laundry. Unable to stay on her feet, the girl fell to the ground and hit her forehead. The things also fell to the ground, and the basket Sola was holding flew upwards. In front of everyone, this basket landed right on the girl's head. Realizing how ridiculous it looked, the girl sobbed. While the other maids helped the new girl up and comforted her in every way possible, Yeonjun realized how terrible Vi Sola was at household chores. But she has an admirable talent for martial arts, doesn't she? How can she be so clumsy? Deciding not to think about it for now, the boy rose to his feet and got ready to go to his room to treat his head. Noticing this, Sola abruptly jumped up and ran towards the young master. Hearing the whimpering girl behind him, Yeonjun turned around on her and asked if she wasn't going to finish her work. The girl with the basket on her head explained that she had been commanded to follow the young master. When asked by whom it was ordered by, Sola replied that her grandfather had ordered it. This girl will now be Jeonjung's personal maid. Most likely, the other maids just put her in that role because they don't want to get involved with the leader's third child. Actually, Gu Yeonjun is the son of a powerful clan. Is it really okay for him to use just anyone as a maid? Sure, Yeonjun has nothing against Sola, but she is the supreme sword after all. While the boy was thinking about it, his new maid had already finished tying his kimono. Lowering his eyes, the boy saw his wrinkled clothes and carelessly tied bow. With the words that he'd rather tie the kimono himself, Yeonjun wondered if his father had any idea who this girl was. Maybe he didn't care, since too many servants had already left his third child. Well, the boys will have a great chance to question their father about everything today. He still can't figure out what's even going on here. As the guy headed towards the clan head's chambers, Wee Sola ran after him and asked him to wait for her. Perplexed, Yeonjun turned to the girl and told her to stay here and finish her business. Such a strict answer upset Sol greatly, but she still did not cross the young master. Their conversation was also being watched closely by Grandpa Wee Moon. Noticing Wee Sola's upset face, Yeonjun glanced at her warily. He then headed for the gate and in parting advised the girl to learn to do her duties properly. A frustrated Sola continued to stand still and try to hold back her tears. However, before closing the gate, Yeonjun suddenly called out to his new maid. Before he left, he promised to reward her if she did her best. After saying that, the boy slammed the door behind him. This promise made the girl's face glow with happiness. And while his granddaughter rejoiced at the imminent reward, Wee Moon exhaled a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Gu Yunjun had already arrived at the doors leading to his father's chambers. The mere sight of those doors creeped the boy out. He and his father had never been close in his previous life. Yunjun didn't even remember them talking to each other like this. It's unlikely that his father will give him anything to say since he called him himself. In that case, the boy has no choice but to listen to him and then ask about Saul and Wee Hyogun. "What are you frozen for?" came the calm voice of the clan head, scaring Yanjun out of his wits and even causing him to accidentally speak obscenely. Already sitting at the same table with his father, the boy could not believe that he had accidentally swore in front of the leader himself. Luckily for him, the head of the clan didn't seem to mind. He only asked his son if he had already met the new servants. Told that the two had already introduced themselves to him, Yanjun thanked his father for such a nice gift. And when the boy decided to ask something else about these new servants to the leader, his father sipped some tea. Asking his son to take his time, the man promised to explain everything when the time came. This response made Janjun realize that his father seemed to know everything and had sent these two men to serve him on purpose. Maybe he and Wee Hyugun have some kind of deal. When he saw his son's anxious face, the clan leader advised him not to worry about minor troubles. It was more important to prepare for the Dragon Alliance meeting tomorrow. Pensively looking out the window, Yanjun tried to remember what a Dragon Alliance meeting even was. And after a couple seconds, the boy finally guessed what his father had just said. A short while later, Gu Yunjun stares at his bodyguard and resolutely asks Muyung to just stab him right there. Of course, the bodyguard tried with all his might to change the young master's mind. Is he really that disgusted to show up at a meeting? The Dragon Alliance Gathering is a special event where new swords are selected. It is held every 2 years to honor the warriors who work to close the demon gates, risking their lives for the Gu clan and the Shaanxi lands themselves. Of course, the direct descendants of the Jiu clan head are obligated to participate in this event. That's why dying right here and now is the only way out for Janjun. If he dies, it will be a valid excuse for not showing up. But after holding out the invitation to the meeting to the young lord, Muyung offered him an alternative way out. He could not force the bodyguard to kill him, but simply wait for the clan leader himself to finish him off for not showing up. Muyung also told him that Elder Li would be at the meeting. He said that if Yanjun ran away again, he would give the boy a whipping with his own hand. Such information made Yanjun even more reluctant to appear at the Dragon Alliance meeting. Among all the elders, Li is the most despicable. He was always demanding special efforts from Gu Yunjun as the only son of the leader, placing the responsibility almost on the honor of the entire clan. In fact, the boy himself realizes that he should thank Elder Li. He was a busy man, but he still had time for guidance. Come to think of it, even his own father didn't pay that much attention to Yanjun. It was surprising that he had become such a loser despite his elder's efforts. Hearing the young master's words, Muyung wondered what he meant. In response, the boy asks him not to take it into his head. And while they were chatting about departure times, enthusiastic female cries were heard from the crowd nearby. Not understanding what the maids were doing, Yanjun asked if they would be ready soon. Apologizing to the master, the girls explained that they were just tidying up Saul. Sking unhappily, the boy asked what the girl had done again. The maids had yet to say anything when Vaisola suddenly emerged from the crowd. She looked incredibly cute in her new clothes. The transformed Sola couldn't help but take notice of her young master. What he saw made Gu Yunjun immediately blush. Who would have thought that a maid's uniform would look so perfect on the body of a man who was to slay a heavenly demon in the future? Running forward, V. Sola approached the young lord and addressed him. "Everyone says I'm beautiful." With a sweet smile, the girl muttered, looking at the boy. Understandably, Sola seemed incredibly beautiful to Janjun, but the only thing the boy could do was look away in embarrassment. Then the girl fixed her hair and resorted to her last trump card. Making pretty eyes at the young gentleman, Sola asked if he thought she was beautiful. At this moment, Yanjun finally exploded with embarrassment. Dodging the question, the blushing boy asked the maid to stop keeping everyone waiting and follow him. Soon they were seated on the wagon together and traveled to the place where the Dragon Alliance meeting would be held. Wee Sola had never ridden a wagon before, and so she was very surprised that this thing was moving so fast. And when one of the maids asked if it was the girl's first time riding a carriage, Sola said that she had thought that horses were only eaten before. She didn't know they could run so fast. Yanjun looked out of the carriage window and once again asked his bodyguard where the meeting was being held. Muyung, who was riding beside him, told him that the action would take place in the Heavenly Market, the most famous shopping district in Shanxi. It would take 4 hours to get there. And since Yanjun hadn't slept at all because of his evening training, when Mu Young suggested that he sleep, he didn't object. But to sleep in a carriage where some girl jumps and loudly tells everyone about how delicious horse meat is will be quite problematic. That was why Yanjun found no other option but to shut the disobedient maid up. In one deft move, the boy shoved a honey cookie into Vaisola's mouth, and surprisingly, it helped very quickly. Deciding to take advantage of the moments of silence, the boy lay down and began to fall asleep. As said before, Yanjun was very tired last night, and so it didn't take him very long to fall asleep. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before the boy woke up to the screams of Sola waking him up. Realizing that she wanted another batch of sweets from him, the boy quietly said that he didn't have any more cookies. When the girl heard this, she was very upset. But as it turned out, the other maids had simply sent V. Sola to wake the young gentleman and inform him that the carriage had arrived on the spot. Barely awake, Yanjun pulled back the curtain and looked out of the wagon. They had indeed arrived at the heavenly marketplace. As he stretched, the boy noticed that Shanxi was especially crowded today. It must be the festival. The long ride must have tired you out. A voice came from someone else's mouth, jolting Yanjun out of his thoughts. This man's name is Zhang Yixil, and he is the deputy head of the heavenly market. He was honored to meet the Gu clan's rising star. Also excited to meet such an honorable man, Gu Yanjun also introduced himself to him. Chang Yixil told the boy that the first day was going to go smoothly, thanks to the efforts of Elder Li and Lady Gu. The deputy head of the heavenly market offered to escort him to his quarters first. Yanjun didn't immediately realize which Lady Gu he was referring to, but then it came to him that Yixil seemed to be referring to his older sister, Yongso. Right now, the boy could only hope they wouldn't meet today. It's a shame those hopes were not realized. And just a couple minutes later, Yanjun and Yonso's gazes crossed. As soon as Gu Yongso noticed her little brother, her face began to express disgust. As befits a young gentleman, Janjun greeted his sister politely. However, the annoyed girl only asked him to shove his greeting up his ass. Yanxia waved her hand in a haughty manner and said that she hoped her brother wouldn't do anything stupid this time. She advised him not to even think about interfering with the Dragon Alliance meeting. There was nothing more despicable than besmirching your family's name. To his older sister's surprise, Yanjun only promised her that he would be quiet as a mouse and asked her not to worry about him. Yelling that she didn't think she'd ever worry about him, Yongso swung around to give her brother a good smack in the face. But noticing the unfamiliar girl next to Yanjun, the older sister suddenly stopped. Scared of this evil aunt, Sola hid behind the young master. After calming down a bit, Yonso sighed irritably. She knew it would be too hard for her younger brother to break old habits. Now she was convinced that he was going to behave as usual. Looking indifferently at his sister, Yanjun asked what she was talking about. Yeonso, for her part, opened the door to the room and gave her brother another scornful glance, saying that she thought he had changed. But apparently, people don't change. After saying that, the dark-haired girl slammed the door behind her with a clatter. Yanjun and the others stood still for a while longer, staring perplexedly at that door, trying to figure out what was wrong with this girl in the first place. Then the boy apologized for the incident. The deputy head of the heavenly market laughed and said that there was no shame in it, as siblings often quarreled. Before heading to his chambers, Yanjun asked the deputy to take him somewhere. Once in the arena, the young lord and his newfound maid could not take their eyes off the beauty of this majestic structure. Rumor has it that the rich like to measure their money, especially at events like festivals. But even so, isn't that a bit much? Today's celebration is dedicated to swords and their merits. Tomorrow, participants will also face duels to determine the new members of the swords. In fact, Yanjun is very lucky that the Bloody Heirs don't participate in such competitions. As far as he knows, he will only be observing. Nothing bad is going to happen, right? So you didn't run away this time? Suddenly heard someone's rough voice from behind Yanjun's back. As soon as the boy turned around, he saw the arm of some huge man rushing towards him at a great speed. Realizing that he had no time left to dodge this swift grab, Yanjun made the decision to block it. He finally failed to do so, and Elder Li still patted his head. Noticing the puzzled look on the boy's face, the gray-haired man asked him what was wrong. As he continued stroking his disciple, the elder noted that normally he would have just run away. However, Yanjun reminded him that someone had promised to twist him into a ram's horn last time if he didn't show his face at this event. Li jerked his hand away in surprise and asked who had spoken such cruel words. The boy replied that it was the second Elder Li. Stroking his student's head once more, The old man admiringly noticed that Yeonjun had finally learned how to answer. The second elder is seriously fixated on Gu Yeonjun. Perhaps the reason is because he is the only son of the head. Meanwhile, gazing at the huge man with fascination, Wee Sola remarks that he looks like a bear. And she likes bears because they are as tasty as horses. Hearing such comments in his direction, Elder Lee glared menacingly at the girl. Pale with horror, Sola added that bears are incredibly cute. Except, although Elder Lee did resemble a bear very much, he clearly didn't seem cute to her. Pressured by the horrible sight of that monster, Sola immediately burst into tears and promised never to eat bears again. Fixing his hair, Yeonjun asked the elder to stop scaring the people around him with that look. Thinking briefly, Lee said the boy intrigued him. Pointing his finger at the girl, the elder clarified if she was his date. Then, drawing the old man's attention to Wee Sola's clothes, Yeonjun explained to him that she was an ordinary servant girl. Taking his gaze away, the second elder grudgingly remarked that things were much more boring than he had expected. The Dragon Alliance meeting will be held tomorrow. Although Gu Yeonjun is only a spectator, he is also a participant, so he should get a good night's sleep tonight. After wishing the elder a good night, Yeonjun was about to go to his quarters when suddenly Old Man Lee decided to add one more thing before he left. Smiling broadly, the man gestured to the boy to show him what would happen to him if he didn't show up for the event tomorrow. When Yeonjun and the elder left, the frightened Wee Sola asked if the big, scary bear uncle had threatened to eat him. Deciding to make fun of his new maid, Gu Yeonjun jokingly said that the bear would first unscrew the girl's head and then eat him. Obviously, it was a terrible joke that scared Saul even more. Walking away from the two, Old Man Lee turned around and finally verified that his assumptions were correct. That child, there's really something about him. The day of the Dragon Alliance meeting has arrived. Jeonjun thought it was going to start in the morning, but it seems to happen closer to lunchtime. The fact was that all Shanxi clans, as well as those who could confirm their identity, were allowed to participate. But no one could have imagined that so many people would gather in the square. Watching the happenings in the square with his bodyguard and maid, Yeonjun realized that apparently becoming a sword is very important to people. Wee Sola interrupted his thoughts, clinging to his arms and pressing herself close to him. Looking around, the girl asked the young lord in horror if Uncle Bear was going to come to her head. And in fact, wasn't it time for him to hibernate? Reminding the maid that it was actually spring, Yeonjun suggested that she go back to her chambers since she was so scared. However, when the girl explained that her grandfather had told her to stay close to the young master, the boy realized that he simply could not tell her to ignore the Supreme Sword's order. To calm Sol down a bit, Gu Yeonjun pointed his finger at Muyun and promised that their guard would kick the bear's ass if anything happened. Not understanding what they were even talking about, the bodyguard asked the young master which bear uncle they were talking about. When he heard the boy say that they were referring to Old Man Lee, Muyung explained that he had no right to raise his hand against the elders. And in fact, Yeonjun should speak more respectfully about his teacher. Then, with his hands spread, Gu Yeonjun gave up and said that in that case, he would just have to give up Wee Sola's head. Of course, Wee Sola didn't agree, but the girl could not cross the young master, and so, since it suited everyone, she would have to die today. Grinning, Yeonjun looked awkwardly at the maid and asked her not to be so dramatic. He was just joking after all. But, as it turned out, the whole show was just to get some dumplings from the young gentleman. Pointing her finger at the cart behind her, the girl said that her grandfather had told her that if you die on a full stomach, your ghost will be nicer. Yeonjun simply couldn't refuse this girl. While waiting for Sola to order whatever she wanted, Muyung noticed that the young master was quite courteous to the servants, and in particular to the maid V. The boy, in turn, said he didn't see it as courteous. He just felt sorry for the girl. How can you say no to her when she's begging for dumplings before she dies? And to be serious, Yeonjun just sees her as that Wee Sola from his past life, and therefore has no idea how to behave with her. Mayung looked at the young master with a sneering look and said that she didn't seem to understand what it meant to be a servant. Even though Yeonjun was aware that she needed to be educated, he still bought her dumplings without question. The boy immediately tried to contradict his bodyguard, but after realizing that he had nothing at all to say on the matter, Yeonjun just continued to stare at Muyung silently. Today, Mayung realized that his young master was not what others said about him. He had never relied on rumors, though. Hearing the bodyguard's mutterings, Yeonjun noticed that this dumpling situation bothered him too much. "Wait a minute, rumors? And how long have you been guarding me?" the boy asked suddenly, realizing what his guard had just blabbed. Curling his fingers, Mu Young narrated that he had been serving the young master for about 2 weeks. That means he was appointed right before Gu Yanjun's regression. Mistress! There was a loud shout that startled the boy and his bodyguard. Turning their heads, the two saw a strange woman begging her mistress not to wander alone in such a dangerous place. The dark-haired girl in turn told the maid that she was worrying in vain. The Dragon Union meeting is an organized event. With so many people from the Gu clan here, what could possibly happen? Looking at the girl's back, Yanjun noticed that her voice seemed familiar to him. Meanwhile, the stranger's maid explained that she was worried about a completely different matter. The thing is that there is a risk of meeting Gu's heir at such an event. Hearing this, Yanjun immediately turned pale. Are they really talking about him? It can't be. There are a lot of men in the Gu family. Still not noticing the boy behind her, the dark-haired girl asked the maid if she really believed that such a thing was possible. There are too many people here, and therefore, meeting Yanjun is tantamount to finding a needle in a haystack. But as she turned around, the dark-haired girl realized she was wrong. Seeing the Gu heir and his bodyguard in front of her, she froze in place. After a silent pause, the girl took a step forward to make sure her eyes were not deceiving her. Just as tensely looking at her, Yanjun continued to stand still, waiting for what would happen next. Finally convinced that the person she thought was standing in front of her, the dark-haired girl shrieked in shock. Ma Young leaned over to the young master and asked if he knew who the two were. That lady and her escort look like they've seen something scary. Gu Yanjun definitely couldn't forget the shoulder-length hair, the beady black eyes, and the very ring on her finger. A ring containing a symbol that is only revealed upon close inspection. Knowing of it, a boy cannot underestimate its significance. This girl is a member of the Hebeiwen clan, and that's not all. In addition to the previously mentioned, she is also Gu Yanjun's fiancée. The reason why Yanjun was arranged to be engaged to a representative of Hebeiwen, one of the 4 major clans, is because the Gu clan's prestige is not inferior to that of the 4. And she and this girl are the same age. Gu Yanjun is the direct heir of his clan. That's why the Hebeiwen were fine with an arranged marriage. Except they didn't know how troublesome Yanjun would prove to be. Rumors of him neglecting training and causing trouble stressed them out. Eventually, their relationship was ruined when Yanjun said those words to his fiancée. Meeting him for the first time since that day, the first thing Hebeiwen Avi asked him was what he was doing here. Staring blankly at his former fiancée, Yanjun remarked that, on the contrary, he should be the one asking what she was doing here. Avi, on the other hand, replied that she was here on business. Besides, the Gu clan doesn't own all of Shanxi. And anyway, does that boy really think that Hebeiwen's heiress has to report to him every step of the way? Yanjun in turn said that he wouldn't mind if she did it for him. Offended by such sarcastic words, Avi shouted that he dare not talk to her so rudely. She is actually a whole year older than him. Oh, well, I'm sorry, sis. Is that better? Yanjun muttered with a smirk, infuriating his former sister-in-law even more. Seeing Wee Sola with a huge tower of plates of dumplings in her hands, the boy offered to leave since she had bought everything. Then, looking at Avi again, Yanjun said he didn't care why she came here. As he walked past his former fiancée, he added that they were very busy, after which he said goodbye to her. Looking at him, Avi couldn't figure out what had happened to him for a while. This was not the reaction she'd expected from him. Anyway, she doesn't care about Janjun right now. Avi has to deal with her brother first. By the way, this is the first time she's seen this girl. Is she really Yangjun's personal maid? She's pretty cute. Was she the one who caused the Gu heir to change? After all, otherwise his behavior today is quite difficult to justify. Need I remind you who you are? Just the daughter of a concubine. Is the very phrase that Janjun used to ruin their relationship. Hearing such words from his mouth that day, Avi immediately ran up to him and grabbed him by the scruff of the neck. Jumping onto the table, the dark-haired girl stared in disgust at the boy's insolent face. Burning with anger, Avi asked what he had just yapped about. The pale Yanjun only looked at her with a smile and clarified that he was only telling the truth. The very next second, the bride slammed her fist into his face with all her might. She was willing to put up with a lot because of an arranged marriage for the sake of the Hebeiwen clan. Avi didn't even pay attention to all those horrible rumors about Janjun. But on this day, even the maid could not persuade her mistress not to take his words to heart. Taking a chair in her hand, Avi only waved the servant away. Walking over to Yanjun lying on the floor, the dark-haired girl stood directly above him. To hell with the wedding! I'm going to finish that bastard off! Avi shouted in rage, bringing the chair over her head. No one knows how, but Gu Yanjun still managed to survive that day. Remembering what a scumbag that boy had been, Hebeiwen Avi couldn't believe that he had changed. It's inconceivable that in the past, he would have helped someone the way he's helping his maid now. Look at him, he offered to help carry some of the plates of dumplings, and he offered to serve them to others. At first, Avi thought she thought Yeonjun had become different. But something seems to have changed in him after all. No, it can't be. He's probably just in a good mood today. There's no way that asshole's getting that mature. But what if Avi is wrong? Just assuming that's the case, would she want to try to get back what they had between them? What do you mean? Came someone's shout, startling Jeonjun again. Noticing how scared the young master was, Mu-young asked if he was all right. Sola, on the other hand, was only concerned about whether the dumplings were intact. In the meantime, one of the commission members explained to the candidate that the problem could not be solved by shouting and tried to calm him down. However, hitting the table, the stranger shouted that he had no time. Who would take responsibility if he was caught? Caught? What do you mean? The commissioner decided to clarify, glancing suspiciously at the candidate. Realizing that he had said too much, the dark-haired boy froze in place. Everyone in the square heard his words, causing a sepulchral silence to immediately hang. I said no such thing, whispered the stranger. Obviously, these words did not convince anyone. Looking at everything that was happening, Mu-young asked the young master if they should intervene. Yeonjun in turn explained that there was no need. Anyone could attend the Dragon Union meeting, of course, as long as they had something to prove their identity. Trouble at the checkpoint is not uncommon. This would usually be dealt with by the Gu clan's order guards, and so there was no point for the heir to get involved. Leaning over to the outbursting kid, one of the guards advised him to stop. But suddenly, raising his head, the dark-haired stranger grabbed the policeman's wrist. In the next instant, he tossed the guard over his shoulder. With a loud clatter, the guy took his opponent to the ground and clobbered his arm. Not realizing what the brat was doing, the commissioner asked what the hell he was doing. Glancing at the man at the table, the dark-haired guy explained that he was only showing off his abilities. And when he asked if he would now be allowed to participate, the shocked commissioner shouted that after this, of course not. Listening to Sola marvel at this performance, Mu-young once again suggested that the young master intervene. Gu Yeonjun didn't want to get into trouble, and so he immediately turned around and told the bodyguard to hurry up and get out of here. Although Mu-young tried to convince the young lord that something should be done about it, the boy explained to him that he just didn't want to get involved. Besides, he thought they could do it themselves. Shouting that you can't do whatever you want, the commissioner reminded the brazen guy that the rules do not allow those who can't prove their identity to participate, and the skills this psycho has demonstrated only added to his problems. Such statements only infuriated the infuriated stranger even more. Do you have no respect for the young head of the Hebeiwen clan at all? The dark-haired boy shouted in rage. Hearing this, Jeonjun and Avi turned around shocked at him. No one expected to see the young head of the Hebeiwen clan in this place. Anyway, Sola didn't care at all about what was going on around her. She only cared about the fact that soon she would be eating delicious dumplings. A few months ago, the Hebeiwen clan's domain. Coming out of her chambers, Avi saw her brother sitting nearby and asked what he was doing. Woo-jin explained that he had just decided to start a fire to warm up and also to roast some potatoes. Deciding not to ask why he was doing this in front of her chambers, Avi asked her brother what that sign in his hand was. The guy explained that sweet potatoes take too long to cook, and so he thought he'd use the thing to start a fire. Without letting her brother speak, Avi slapped him on the head. She looked at the boy with shame and asked if he realized what the sign was. It's an identification plaque personally awarded by the clan head, a reward for graduating at the top of the top students of the Dragon Divine Academy, as well as becoming the youngest heir in history. This thing can start a fire stronger than Woo-jin can imagine. Taking the fries away from her brother, Avi advised him to learn how to act like an heir already. An heir, right? Woo-jin muttered, lowering his gaze. Looking pityingly at the guy, Avi said that she sometimes didn't know what he was thinking at all. Her brother is very talented at such a young age. He has everything he needs to succeed, but he can't get enough. Then, smiling, Woo-jin asked his sister not to be so hard on him. In fact, he's been wanting to get away from here for a long time. Well, then run away and then come back, Avi pronounced. Having said that, she couldn't imagine what the consequences of the phrase would be. The very next day, her brother left a note notifying his sister that he would be away for a while. Once again, reading that piece of paper, an enraged Avi crumpled it in her hands. She didn't realize that when her shitty brother wrote, "not for long," he meant he'd be gone for 4 whole months. All this time, Avi had been searching hard for any information about her missing brother. One day, her maid reported that the poor people had found some information for her. The young clan head headed to Shanxi. But why would he go so far away? Today, standing in front of a commissioner in Shanxi, Wu Jin continues to shout that he has shown everything to prove who he is. And until he's allowed to participate, he won't budge. Without letting the commissioner get a word in edgewise, Wu Jin yelled again that he had no time and was willing to bear the blade of the Dark Knight so that he would finally be believed. After such an argument, Yanjun was convinced that this guy was probably really who he claimed to be. The Dark Knight blade was an exclusive technique of the direct heir of the Hebeiwen clan. Realizing what could happen next, Yanjun decided to get out of here quickly before he was dragged into something worse. Shit, I'm screwed, thought the boy, seeing the second elder's hand in front of his face. As he approached the dark-haired fellow along with his apprentice, Old Man Li remarked that he wasn't a trickster after all, since he was so fond of the Dark Knight blade. In addition, he seemed to be quite a skillful fellow. In the end, the second elder allowed the Hebeiwen clan's young clan head to participate. Bowing to the second elder, the dark-haired fellow introduced himself as the Hebeiwen clan's heir, Hebeiwen Wujin. He was honored to meet the great master of the Pure Flame Fist, the famous warrior of the Gu clan. This behavior greatly amused Old Man Li. He laughed and said that it had been a long time since he had heard his full title. Interrupting the second elder, the commissioner asked if he was sure this guy wasn't an imposter. He never confirmed that he was indeed the Hebeiwen clan's heir. Old Man Li, on the other hand, replied that he didn't doubt him. This guy is just like his father, even if you look at his body. This build is typical of the Hebeiwen. Plus, there's a ring on his finger, which is also evidence. Leaning over to the boy, the second elder asked to tell the reason why Hebeiwen's heir suddenly decided to participate in the competition where new Gu clan swordsmen were selected. With a confident look at Old Man Li, Wu Jin explained that he was simply bored with the clan. Laughing loudly, the elder remarked that the reason was indeed a worthy one, then asked if his father had given him permission to leave the clan. Wu Jin in turn said that his father didn't sort of approve of it anyway, and so he just ran away from home. And while his mentor was laughing even louder, Yanjun realized that not only was this dude crazy, but he was also stupid. Noticing that the kid looked quite trained, Old Man Li asked how old he was, to which he replied that he would be 23 this year. The elder noticed that Wu Jin was much younger than he had expected. The Hebeiwen clan must have raised a real monster. That little idiot from Gu has a lot to learn from him. When Mu Young heard the elder talking about some little idiot, he whispered in the young master's ear that he was probably the one he was talking about. Wee Sola also approached the boy and asked why the bear uncle had called him so rudely. In response to all of this, Yanjun only asked the two to shut up. Yanjun doesn't care at all what Old Man Li says about him. If this guy is really Wu Jin, then he really is a real monster. He should win the title of Blade Emperor very soon. By the way, how come there's another Hebeiwen clan member here? Isn't it a bit much? As soon as Janjun thought of this, Avi ran out of the crowd and headed towards her brother. Noticing his little sister, Wu Jin got excited and was ready to ask what she was doing here. At the same instant, Avi jumped up and smacked her foot into her brother's face. The impact was so strong that the guy flew several meters away from the place where he was standing just a second ago. You crazy son of a bitch! What an air! You took off and ran away, leaving a pathetic note, said the angry Avi, unleashing her terrifying aura. Realizing that she wouldn't stop at one blow, Wu Jin asked his sister to take her time and listen to him. Deciding not to lynch him so quickly, Avi asked if he had anything to say for himself. To be honest, Wu Jin hadn't expected his sister to actually want to listen to him, and so he didn't have time to come up with a good excuse. Mercy was the last thing he had time to say before he saw his little sister's leg once more. Watching the typical brother-sister fight, Yanjun remarked that at this rate, this guy might as well die, so he asked Old Man Li if they should separate them. But the second elder objected, explaining to the young master that the men of the Hebeiwen clan were quite stubborn. This dude wouldn't die even if you beat him with a rebar. Unfortunately, very quickly Old Man Li changed his mind when Wu Jin himself began begging him for help. That's enough. Leave him alone, came an unfamiliar voice. Turning around, Avi, sitting covered in blood, asked who dared to interfere in their family squabble. She certainly didn't expect to see Elder Gu himself in front of her. Releasing the remnants of her brother, the girl apologized for introducing herself late. She is Hebeiwen Avi, the great master of the Pure Flame Fist. Bowing to the elder, Avi said that they had behaved inappropriately. The girl promised to make amends a little later, as she was now going to bring her bad brother home. And after hearing Woojin say he wasn't going anywhere, Avi turned on him and asked if he hadn't had enough punches. Except the guy himself wasn't in the mood for jokes. Seeing the look in her brother's eyes, Avi realized the seriousness of his intentions. The girl asked what was wrong, to which Woojin replied that it was very boring in the clan. But the Gu clan might be more fun. Then, putting a hand on her brother's shoulder, Avi asked him to grow up already. He is Hebeiwen's heir, after all. But as it turns out, that's the main reason Woojin came here. He wants to have fun before he becomes the leader. There are two ways to avoid that fate, to become a cripple or to die. But both of those options are not to his liking. The guy doesn't want to lead the clan, but right now there are only monsters that bear their last name besides them. With a glance at Avi, Woojin promised that he would definitely take over one day. There was no way he would let that time fall on his sister's shoulders. That was why he had agreed to be the heir, even though he didn't want it. Yeonjun interrupted their touching reunion by asking the second elder if he would really let this dude participate. Given the current situation, such antics could be a pretty bad idea. Old Man Lee agreed with his disciple, adding that Hebeiwen heir's participation might involve unforeseen circumstances. But the elder doesn't want to refuse this guy either. After thinking it over, Lee decided to offer Woojin a deal. The terms were simple. If he managed to defeat the second elder, he would be allowed to participate in today's event. Of course, neither Jeonjun nor Avi was comfortable with that suggestion. It's just crazy, isn't it? Ignoring them, Old Man Lee explained that only 10 attacks would determine the winners, then asked Woojin if he agreed to such conditions. Just like that, the heir pronounced, glancing suspiciously at the elder. While his opponents were preparing for the bout, to all of the above conditions, Old Man Lee added one more. If Woojin touched him even once in a dozen attempts, he would win. Before the elder could finish, Woojin suddenly snapped out of his seat and was at his back. Drawing his sword, the guy was already ready to deliver his quickest blow to the back of his standing opponent to end this fight in just one round. But suddenly, an intimidating aged laugh was heard. "How impatient!" the second elder uttered, letting Hebeiwen's heir know that he wouldn't be able to win today.
Pet the cat.